So I believe we are live. So welcome folks who are trickling in from the previous session. I hope you're trickling in from the previous session. If you missed it, hearing about the tech platforms that are happening in Africa right now was phenomenally interesting. It was such a great conversation. So happy to have you guys all popping back over into our chat. For us, we are actually going to be talking about the convergence and the polarities between tech and health. We do actually have one panelist who is making her way here. She's not here yet. So in order to buy her a little time, I will slowly start with the introductions also so that people can continue to trickle in from previous conversations. So you probably already saw me or possibly already saw me at the opening keynote. So I'm Nikki Lavoie, keynote, that's not a thing. I'm the CEO and founder of MindSpark. And I should hopefully eventually have 3 panelists joining with me to talk about this great conversation. So maybe if I could start with you, Bassem, and you could tell me a little bit about where you are, where you're working, and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Is that
Yeah.
We've got 2 thumbs up on that side. Good. So yeah, my name is Bassem. I'm currently living and working in Berlin as a senior UX researcher for a company called Dance. And our mission is all about making cities more livable through a premium e-bike subscription that's going to launch later this year. So my day-to-day involves understanding current and potential users of our service and getting my hands dirty with research across hardware, operations, and software. Prior to that, I was working at Blinkist and Zalando and SoundCloud in, reverse chronological order.
So can I ask, where are you from originally, Bassem?
Oh, that's I simultaneously love and find this question quite challenging. But the short story is I was raised in London, England, in an American school. That's why I have the accent that I have. And my parents are a mixture of Middle Eastern and Japanese. So
I was asking because I think you might be the 4th or 5th expat in Berlin we've had today on the panels. So we have someone from our team who's also an expat in Berlin, and we've had at least 2 panelists, I think, that were expats in Berlin. Elvin is also an expat who also lived in London. So I will pass the mic over to you, Elvin, and maybe you can introduce.
Yes, and also with Middle Eastern parents. Interesting how small the world is sometimes. You might have seen me actually host a panel earlier today, but now I'm wearing a very different hat, which is basically the story of how I got into user research. Back in the day when I was just about in between careers and contemplating getting a master's degree, quantified self, the concept of quantified self blew up. And it really, really touched my fancy. And I thought, we could do so much with this. Everybody's using social networks to report on how much they've exercised, what they've eaten, and all that data is sitting there. And we need to kind of package it and feed it back to them in a way that's easy to use. And that was basically the initial idea for the startup that I played with, got a bit of seed money, built a prototype. And then as 99.9% of startups go, it just fizzled away. But I think it was an amazing MBA for me, and which then actually made me go and get a master's degree in digital anthropology. And that's basically how I introduced myself into research. Now I do research in all areas possible and imaginable, but I think health tech has a very, very special place in my heart, and I follow it very closely.
Well, on that note, I'm going to slowly get us started. And if Laurel is able to join, then I will, I'll let her introduce herself as well and kind of add her into the conversation from there. So just a little bit of information for everyone on why I wanted to have this conversation specifically. So there is this thing that's been happening whereby obviously tech is going to innovate, it's going to grow, it's going to adapt according to our needs and our uses, which is what we want it to do, right? And so as a result, we end up using tech more. And in some cases, we might think of things like, okay, well, now I watch more Netflix than I did before, or now I've got an Apple Watch and that helps me keep track of my step count or my heart rate, or other things that might be interesting to me when I'm working out. At the same time, we're also starting to be hit with all of these little data points about how it's really important to take a break from tech and to walk away from electronic devices, and how we need to, spend more time in nature. And so I was thinking it would just be really great to talk to someone like you, Bassem, who is actually working with tech to try and sort of improve the health of people and improve the health of actually our world at large, and to kind of figure out where is the overlap and where is this kind of interesting field going, and what are the things we as users need to be aware of, and what are the things that we as researchers also need to be aware of. So maybe as a first question to sort of throw it out to you, Bassem, is in telling us a little bit more about dance, what, in your opinion, is something that you think really allows technology to help us be more mindful about our health?
That's a really, really great question. And I think for me, since joining dance a few months ago, it's been really, really interesting to see that something like an e-bike is regarded as, for some people, it's not really regarded as something which is healthy, because if they wanted to do something fitness related, they'd jump on a regular bike. Whereas other people are really seeing an e-bike as being able to enable something like beyond just like the fitness side of health. So I've heard of people like really being positive about this idea that an e-bike gets them out of the house, gets them to have fresh air, gets them out of a car or a packed like train or subway. And I think it's been really interesting understanding just what the spectrum of health looks like and how health can be defined by different people in different ways. And I think also to that point, the one thing that I didn't really expect joining dance initially was that, I talked about this hardware operations and software side of our product, but ultimately when people are subscribing to get an e-bike, that's what they want. They want the e-bike. So actually the software should, in my mind, not get in the way of that experience too much. If people can't hop on their bike within, a couple of minutes, of understanding how to use it and feeling safe, then we're creating too many hoops for people to jump through. So I really have been enjoying just understanding like how my definition of health has been challenged just by speaking to other people in the industry and also speaking to users as well. So that's my spiel about that question.
Yeah, that's excellent. And so then maybe over to you, Alvin, in all of the different things you've seen, what are some of the ways that you've experienced tech impacting health?
Well, I think, especially with the start of the quantified self movement, I think it has become a way to make ourselves accountable for things that we do for our health and to be able to track that accountability. But I think part of the reason why we're having this conversation is because I think there's a tipping point for that accountability. I don't know how many movies I've seen where there are people wearing this stepwatch and they're just walking in place because they need to, complete their 10,000 steps, or tying them to their pets and getting them to run around. So I think we sometimes, with so many tracking devices, tracking so many different things from nutrition to steps to calories burned to all of that, we forget that what we're accountable for is ourselves and our health rather than the tech itself. And we start investing too much time updating the tech rather than taking a step and, focusing on the health part.
Do you think that there could be some positive sides to any of this? I mean, obviously, as you say, the accountability is a positive side, but I'm just thinking of a personal friend of mine who I'm one of these people who, as an expat myself, I stay in touch with a lot of my friends on social media. And she has had 2 kids. And after the birth of her daughter, she got an Apple Watch. And she posts a lot on Instagram about how her Apple Watch will remind her at the end of the day, you haven't quite gotten in all those steps. And she will walk around the neighborhood because the Apple Watch has reminded her that she hasn't gotten in, her goal. So I guess, yes, it can be, if you're tying it to the dog, that's one thing, but do you think there are some kind of positive
What you're saying is actually best practice. And even to Bassem's example, if it basically gets people one step farther to where they were before, it cannot be the ideal for everyone. You know, everybody's habit forming, everybody's lifestyle, everything changes all the time. But if it gets them one step closer to an ideal, I think it works. I think it's great. You shouldn't let it overtake you. It shouldn't be for the tech's sake.
Lovely. Well, before I let Bassem also answer that question, we have Laurel here. Laurel, thank you so much. I know you had some technical difficulties. I really appreciate you sticking with it and joining us. It's really great to have you.
Speaking of tech
Yes.
issues.
Yes, it has to happen at some point in every session. Not to throw you on the spot, I hope you don't feel too frazzled, but maybe you could just give the viewers a little bit of an intro about yourself. So, where are you joining us from? Who are you working with? And kind of a little bit about the stuff you're working on these days.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Laurel, Laurel Stark. I am the creative director on the Sims franchise at EA. And in my kind of side life, I'm a very loud and outspoken advocate for mental health and creativity. And in 2020, I launched a program called Our Silent Partner, which is a crowdsourced portfolio of work that creatives use to explain how they feel inside. So basically, it's making what is kind of an invisible thing into public art, so we can talk about it and help kind of bust the stigma around that. So yeah, that's kind of like my way in here. And I have worked in creative. Kind of one foot in creative and one foot in tech for a really long time. I've worked with Google, with TikTok, with Intel. So definitely care about mental health and definitely have a point of view on that in terms of our tech and screens.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, what we were just talking about right as you were joining was the idea that tech can have a positive impact on health and then sort of a tipping point where it's not positive anymore. So I was just about to ask Bassem if he can clarify a little bit from his perspective for you, where is that tipping point lie, or how do you find that tipping point? How do you figure out where it is?
Well, I'm to be perfectly honest, I am one of those people that sees 300 remaining steps and gets out of the house just to do those. So I think in a certain sense, like it's possible to kind of shift and delegate that kind of responsibility to do something for your health to a tool, or I mean, even with the analogy of like a personal trainer, I think those things can potentially create a habit to be more accountable for your health or to live a more healthy lifestyle. And I don't really have any issues with that. I think whatever works for an individual is great. And again, I totally agree that one step in the right direction is still better than no steps at all. Literally, I guess. But I think what I've really, when I'm thinking about this subject, I think we're still really accountable for how we feel and for our own health. A tool can tell us to take 300 steps, but it won't be able to, at least in the foreseeable future, reliably tell us how we're feeling. So I think it's really important to check in with yourself, how you're feeling, and not like get into the habit of doing things for the sake of doing. I remember I was tracking my mood every day for a year using a mood tracker app. And those last months, I was literally just doing it so I could do it. And after a year of doing it, I decided to drop it because I wasn't getting any benefit from that practice. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, Laurel, do you have something to add already at this at this stage of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely one of those people that needs to get better about using the tools at my disposal for my health. I'm kind of like, I went off the deep end a little bit like in 2020. And for me, I think that the one thing that the way that I've been approaching, kind of screens and technology is really about connection, because for me, my mental health has gotten loud, and I have a diagnosis, and it's something that I talk about a lot because I think that we should normalize that. And for me, being able to connect and have those conversations and feel that like human connection, like when, especially during shelter in place, when it was harder to connect, like that was for me, like how I was using the technology. And yes, I think it can be overwhelming depending on how you're feeling or what's happening for you that day. And I think you just have to be able to decide, like, is this actually going to help? And if it's not, the great thing about it is you can turn off your phone. You know, that's the thing, is that it's technology is there when you need it, but if it's not helping, like you can set it down, you can log out of the app, you can go outside and get your feet on the ground. And I think that's yeah, I think for me, the way that I've been using technology mostly is about staying connected, because that's been, really important to me, taking care of my mental health. But I could use a few more of the step trackers. I haven't turned on those apps yet. So hopefully this will be a little inspiration there to get me out of here, off this call, and get tracking my steps after it.
That's great. And actually what you said is a great segue into another question, which I'm also going to tie back to an earlier session. So Norbert was leading a session earlier today on kind of social innovation and social justice, and kind of why that matters. And so thinking about, all of us are kind of here in some sort of creative or user research or user experience design capacity in relation to something that can have an impact on health, mental health or physical health. And so I guess I'm wondering, when we think about, as you were saying, Laurel, when we think about designing things that really can be helpful, what are some of the things that you all consider when you know that accessibility, inclusivity, diversity are all things we absolutely need to be considering? So what are the things that you kind of take into account when you're working on, the health related stuff that you're working on now? Maybe Bassem, you want?
Yeah, sure. So I think, working for an e-bike subscription product, I think I'm very mindful of the fact that the actual product and service that we're providing by design will exclude quite a lot of people. I'm thinking people with physical disabilities, people who might be visible, like have visual challenges, etc. And I think that that's, to a certain extent, also natural, depending on like what product or service you actually go out to design. But I think it's really important not to forget anyone within your reach. And I think when I think about the challenges of designing for many people within within what dance is doing, I think that people have different body types, different heights. I mean, even different thresholds for discomfort when you're sitting on a bike saddle. So I think these things are really important, and I think it's best. I think what I try to do is to just make sure that we're listening to people and conducting research, and not dismissing something which might feel like it's only affecting a small number of people. It's a learning process. I think it's something that we all need to just be aware of and mindful of, and also drive as people within our own organizations as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Elvin, how about you? I know you know very well from all of our internal conversations at MindSpark how we're always trying to figure out how we can be more inclusive on the research side. So when we do get asked to test anything health related or anything that could have an impact on health, we're always trying to think about how can we make sure we include different voices. I would love to know your kind of experience and.
Yeah, one of the research projects I did a few years ago was around the elderly and how they are not as tech savvy as younger generations. And so they are in need of good health and in need of tracking and in need of, making sure that they're okay, especially the ones that are living alone, but they are not really mastering this technology, the Apple Watches and the iPhones and all of that stuff. So I think connected devices, we were working to do research on actual like furniture that when they sat on it would actually get their blood pressure. They would get, they would have like a jumper to wear that would resonate to remind them to take their pills. They had shoes that could actually figure out that if they fell, it would call a number. So these kinds of things are very inclusive for the elderly. I think the more us digital people get old, we are going to be in need, and we're maybe going to be adapting much quicker and much easier to these things as well. But there's that aspect of it. It's not just all of us putting a watch on and trying to get 10,000 steps in. There are some people who are actually in dire need of this and don't have any other solution but this.
Yeah, Laurel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think my point of view is a little bit different here because I'm not making health tech, but I am making a game that enables people to be creative, and arguably
sure.
The Sims, is one of the most inclusive games out there. We definitely have a long way to go to fully get there. But I think, we are aiming to create a tool that enables like the democratic, that aims to democratize creativity, so that people can create their own experiences and create experiences that reflect their real lives. And I think that that's something that's really important, not just to mental health, but also to making sure that we're telling all the stories and that we're considering, a full range of what people need. And for us, to that point, I think one thing that's been so amazing is that we have like a constant dialogue going with our gamers. We have a constant dialogue going with them, what they want, what they need, what isn't working for them. And I think that's available also to anyone on the user research side, or anyone, even just using social to have that like social listening. I think sometimes we're so focused on solving the problem that we're not even asking like if we're solving the right problem. And so for us, a big part has been like shutting up and listening, and just like, and actually getting the feedback and hearing like, oh, okay, so we're not the ones with all the answers. Like, you have this community to crowdsource, like really use them. And I think that that's been for us, the listening there has really enabled us to, push in this new direction that really is in alignment with our brand values and how we want to show up in the world.
I mean, for me personally, I do kind of associate Sims with mental health. I mean, I do. I know a lot of people who have said to me at some point or another, Sims got me through insert hard time. Maybe it was a breakup, or maybe it was sheltering at home, or whatever it might be. So it may not be health tech in the way we think of it, but it's certainly related, as far as I'm concerned. And so do you guys have any experiences, or I don't want to call it a testimonial per se, but speaking of this listening and hearing, have you guys had any of these kinds of, like Sims got me through whatever? Have you had anyone say to you, or had one of those experiences like, oh, thanks to your product X, and that kind of validates this sort of connection between what you're working on and
yeah.
Maybe Laurel, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start here, and by saying, first of all, like, we're definitely, one of the reasons I'm new to the team. I'm 2 months in, and a big part of the reason that I came in was because I am, deeply passionate about DEI and felt very in alignment with what they're trying to do, and also that I thought I had a point of view to bring here that. That was around like mental health and being in service to a creator community, and what does that look like in a broader sense. And I think one of the most exciting things about The Sims is that as a brand that has over 20 years of history, like, we've grown up with people. So we've been a part of people's lives for really important things in their life. And I think especially looking at the LGBTQ plus community, because, our game was the first game to have same-sex marriage. And this idea where people are actually able to, or even the gender fluidity, able to try that on in our game, explore, figuring out, like, being able to explore and try on who they are becoming as people, or their own experiences in a safe space, has been absolutely transformational to people. And so I love, for me, especially as a queer person, like, I love getting feedback from that community. And we were recently, like, for our 21st anniversary, our birthday, we recently pulled a bunch of, commentary from people and all the ways that Sims had meant something to them. And so I think especially the things that were coming from the LGBTQ community, where they were like, I came out in The Sims. Like, I figured out I was gay in The Sims, and to be able to, like, figure out who you are in a place that feels accepting, maybe before that's able to be your experience in the real world, like, that's something that, like, just gets me in the feels.
Yeah, totally. How about you, Bassem? Do you have any kind of experience where, I don't know, biking or anything has really changed somebody's life?
So actually, the immediate example that comes to mind was actually at my previous company, Blinkist. So what Blinkist does is they basically create like these nonfiction key ideas from various different books and content in that space, so that you can get the really like key ideas of that content quickly. So I think the too long didn't read version is movie trailers, but for nonfiction books. And I remember getting on a user interview at some point with a participant who was on the spectrum, and they talked about how Blink has actually introduced them to a bunch of different books and content to be able to more effectively communicate in their day-to-day life. And I think that was really like heartwarming to be on the other side of that. And I think it was one of those moments where I really did feel like the participant was being authentic and genuine, and that it had changed their life for the better.
Yeah, that's super powerful. How about you, Elvin?
So I'm going to take a right turn and talk about a bit of appropriation of technology that's not necessarily created and meant for health. And talk about social gaming a little bit, because I did my thesis on that when I did digital anthropology. And I studied how farmers were using Farmville as a way to relax at the end of a day of real farming in the field. And there were plenty of them all over the world, and especially in Turkey, which is where I actually did my field work. And basically, what came out of it was a way to communicate. It was a way to create a community and to connect, especially for people, again, who are not, I don't know, speak the language enough or able enough to create profiles on these social networks and to upkeep. This is a visual way to create and express yourself with your farm. On top of that, a visual way to check on each other. So if the crops were, working, if people were picking things up, and if the layout was changing, everybody's okay. But we found out somebody's farm didn't change for 2 weeks, for example. We give them a call. They were in hospital. So people were kind of keeping track on each other and their health and their well-being via their behavior inside the social game.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a great point that you raise, is things that were not necessarily intended to have an impact on health that do. And I don't mean, again, to pick on, I hate to pick on the streaming services, but not the things that we can then say, oh, well, we're accidentally spending too much time with them and that can have a negative effect on health. But the kinds of things where there's sort of a hidden health benefit to being more engaged, which is really, really fascinating. And I'm also just wondering from this group, do you have any sort of opinions on, so there's this sort of like new wave of health tech that's come out, right? So there's meditation apps. There's no shortage of meditation apps. We know that there are a couple that are maybe more well-known than others. There's mood trackers, as you mentioned, Bess, and I was using one a few years ago as well. And so things that are like really specifically designed to tap into health, but also specifically mental health. Just wondering, for any of you, do you have any kind of thoughts and opinions on this sort of tech? Is it helpful? Is it dangerous? Is there something that, is there a tipping point here, or are these things just unanimously good so long as you use them, the way that they are intended to be used? Maybe Elvin, since you went last time, I could pick on you first. Thoughts on health tech?
So I think we are in an unusual situation right now because of the pandemic and because we've been isolated, and especially people who have had to isolate by themselves and alone. I think these types of apps actually provide us the anchors that a regular day would have provided us before the pandemic. Like, you wake up, you commute, you have breakfast, you have a lunch break. All of that has meshed into one. When you're in front of a screen doing remote work at home, there are no anchors to the day. And time flies really quickly. But I find that these apps actually help people provide the anchors again, and also help people find some kind of help and support where they can't reach out and get any person to person as well. Of course, there's a ping point. Staring at a screen and meditating may be not the ideal way to meditate. Maybe actually opening the window and staring at nature and doing it, watching a sunrise might be better. But At least it's better than not doing anything, as we talked about before. It's getting into a habit. And I find most of the time human nature dictates that you get bored of that similarity and you go out and look for more if the habit has actually ingrained itself. So I find it to be positive so long as, it's within the tipping point.
Yeah, Laurel, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's two things that I find like really exciting about kind of this boom of like mental health tech. One, that yes, there are some folks still on the fringes that may not be, adapting with tech quite as quickly or might have, physical limitations in how they can use tech. But the fact that we have this type of services available through technology, through your phone, really helps make things more accessible and more affordable to the mass market. And I think that that's really important. Whereas, going to sit with a meditation teacher, like that might be too expensive, or you might be in a small town where that's not a thing. And so I love the fact that this is, basically making it available to everyone as long as you have a phone. And I think that that's really exciting. From an accessibility standpoint. And the other thing is, as somebody who, is really doing my part to normalize mental health conversations and to get people to kind of bust that stigma so that we can have really open and honest conversations about the fact that it's really normal to struggle, and that the fact that this last, what we're going through right now is like a trauma, a collective trauma. So I find that the technology is all out there is helping mainstream mental health conversations. I mean, we still have a long way to go, but that for me, just as a topic is exciting. It's exciting that, my dad knows about Calm, because he's not somebody that would be talking about his mental health. Like that's not his style. So I do think that, as, in conversation, like it's helping normalize it just because it's so accessible. And I really, that excites me about it. So for me, I think it's positive.
Yeah. And just to add a small point to that before I turn it over to you, Bassem, is, as an expat, and I know a lot of people who are expats, almost all of our team is, and a lot of my friends here in Paris are, and I have got friends based elsewhere. One of the things that happens sometimes when you uproot yourself and you move to a new place is you don't always know the language of the new place where you've settled down. And becoming an expat can be a really jarring experience, both mentally and physiologically. I would say there's a change in the food. There could be a change in air quality. Maybe you're walking more because you're in a certain type of city that has a certain type of transportation system or whatever the case may be. And the fact that you can access, let's say you're an American in Paris, as I am, the fact that you can access something like therapy still, whereas normally it would be a very, very difficult, hill to surmount, needing therapy being based in Paris if you don't speak French and if you can't find anyone who speaks English. So I would say that for sure there is definitely an increase in access to certain tools and things that people can use to kind of improve their mental health. So Bassem, any
Yeah, I can only agree with what's been said so far. I think when it comes to this boom in like mental health apps, it's I think it's also just really great at spreading awareness of mental health in general, and like I think having all of these different conversations around tools and practices and habits, it's just really it's really amazing to see. And I can only speak from personal experience when I was going through a really, really rough time a few years ago. Here in Berlin, I was also new to the city. Kind of like classic expat, like feeling like excited about being here, but also feeling a little bit outside of, certain groups and not knowing the language. But I think if those tools had been more widespread at that time, it would have done a lot for me, because I can definitely say making cold calls and writing emails to send into a seeming void of some kind was not the thing that I needed when I needed help at that time. So yeah, absolutely think this is great. And if I would be surprised if like one of the big like mental health apps hasn't already gotten an ad spot on the Super Bowl or something like that. Maybe it's coming soon. And yeah, super excited about it.
Well, I did just see that Calm earned itself quite a bit of positive PR by taking over the fines for Naomi Osaka,
Yep.
who has pulled out of Roland Garros due to the press conferences. So, I mean, I think that's probably right up there with Super Bowl exposure in terms of making people aware that hey, mental health is important, and we are a tech company that stands behind that. So I do have a couple of different questions, and we've only got a couple minutes left. So I'm going to turn this over to the questions. So Norbert is asking if any of you guys have any kind of tips around the fact that there might be some PTSD happening now with people who are super isolated. They've been working from home for ages and ages. So any thoughts on any of your experiences, whether personally or professionally, that might shed light on this? Maybe.
Yeah. I don't have all the answers, obviously, but some things that I've seen work well is just, I think, companies doing their best to acknowledge that that this is a collective trauma for us, and that we are overstimulated by our screens, even though that's what's keeping us, able to collaborate. So I've actually at EA on the marketing side, we've moved based on a mental health conversation. We've moved to half Fridays for through the end of I think through the beginning of September. So that's actually, and we're calling them you get a half focus day, and so essentially no meetings are allowed beyond noon. And you have rest of the day to either work on, work that you need to actually have collected focus time for, or you can do things to take care of yourself. And the fact that that's like a company-wide culture, you actually feel compelled to do that because it's on the calendar, it came out, it's official, everybody has it on their calendar. And I think that that's just those types of things, even though they're a small thing and it's a half day, it's really about the messaging that's coming from the company, because it's saying your mental health is valued here. And they're acknowledging what we're in right now. And I think things like that really go a long way. Those small things or having, having your boss just put a note in their bio, hey, working weird hours now. Feel free to respond when you're working during your hours, or those kinds of things that give people permission to take care of themselves and be offline when they need to be. I think those kinds of things are really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. Elvin.
I'm going to go back to the first lockdown where we actually organically created our own Slack language at MindSpark, where we would use emojis to give an indication of our mental health status, basically. So if we put a lemon, it meant that we were hard at work, but we just didn't want to be bothered, and we didn't feel social, and we didn't want to get on Zoom with the camera on. And if we felt really, chatty and wanted to talk to people, we would have another emoji so that people could communicate with one another and socialize. I think that was very helpful in getting through, in not having to verbally justify the mental state you're in, but to actually just get the message across anyway. I think we're talking about health tracking individually. I think as employers and companies, we need to track the overall health of the company as well. Yeah. And I think those are all keys, and providing resources and kind of collaborating with one another, with peers, to be able to overcome things. And also agree, because I think we all just jumped on Zoom altogether to be social on the screen, but agree that remote socialization is just not the same. And some people might get Zoom fatigue, and some people might need the Zoom connection. So not everybody is the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. And how about you, Bassem?
Yeah, I would totally agree with the fact that not everybody is the same. I think when it comes to the remote work and the inherent isolation that some people are experiencing with that, I think we also can't forget that remote work has also been very good for some people as well. It's cut down on the commute, and I think it's allowed some parents, maybe better or for better or for worse, to spend more time with their children. And I think one thing that I have seen returns on is just being vulnerable. And I think it really depends on the organization that you're a part of and whether or not you feel safe doing so, of course. But being vulnerable and telling my team, hey, you know what, I'm not doing that well today. I need a little bit of time away from work, or, just, yeah, I mean, I wrote a vulnerable message on my Slack workplace, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. And I was just so like, I don't know, so heartwarmed by the fact that people were reaching out to me and asking me if I was okay, offering their support, offering an ear to listen to. So I can only suggest that based on my own experiences.
Yeah, I think you all hit the nail on the head. And one thing that I've learned as kind of running a small team is definitely what one person needs is not what another person needs. And I can say from the perspective of an employer that it's incredibly difficult to try and find solutions for mental health for constant remote working, because it's just difficult to sort of roll something out and hope that it's going to have the desired effect kind of across the board. So I personally am very glad that there's things like Calm and Headspace and other kinds of things out there, and it's something that, yeah. Well, I guess there are a couple of other questions left in the chat, but I would love to just sort of I feel like they're a bit complex. So I encourage the people who have written the questions in the chat to maybe connect with you all on LinkedIn if they want to post these questions, because what I'd love to do is to just end with a little word from you on where do you think health tech could go, should go, might go in the future moving forward. Maybe Elvin, I'm going to pick on you first this time.
I was really impressed with the project I talked to you about earlier. I think these connected, it's not even devices anymore. It's like the shirt we wear, the glasses we wear, all of these connected devices. And will move beyond being gadgety gimmicks and would actually become a very important part of lives, especially where there's a generation of more isolated elderly people are going to come into play. This whole idea of everybody living in crowded families is getting smaller and smaller. There are more single elderly people living in big cities that are really isolated. And I think these kinds of technologies, the online gaming, the socializing, the connection with families, all of that is going to have a very important effect on their lives, I think, in the future.
Great. What do you think, Laurel?
I mean, my hope is that through through more like these connected experiences that we're able to get alerted to potential solutions for ourselves. Like, it would be nice to, because, for example, if you are getting into a dark place or you're feeling overwhelmed already with what's going on, it's a lot to reach out, it's a lot to think, oh, I might be going into a dark place. I should figure out who my therapist needs to be. So getting to this place where it's like your tracker says like, hey, you're getting up, you're not sleeping well, you're getting up later and later. Like, have you looked at your mood? Here's a therapist nearby, something like that to to actually prompt solutions for people and streamline, like, I think some of those experiences for us. Like, that would be my hope, since the technology's there, and they have the data to actually make it, easier for us to make, better choices for ourselves.
Yeah, amazing. So, final word, Bassem, no pressure.
Well, okay. This is going to be the moment where like absolute gibberish comes out of my mouth. So, so I think I love the word streamlining. I think that's really something I'm quite excited about. Maybe it did take a global pandemic to like really shine the spotlight on like mental health. I can't say I'm thankful for the pandemic, but I would say that at the same time, I'm seeing a lot more conversations out in the wild about mental health. I'm listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos where mental health is explicitly mentioned, even though that's not the order of the day when it comes to the content. And I'm also just I'm hoping that this continues to evolve and this continues to develop. And I guess I'm also kind of excited about like Apple Watches having like fall detection tech and stuff like that. But that's probably a whole nother conversation.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
great. Thank you all for joining. This was a really great conversation and one that's very near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Laurel, finding the way to make it to join us. It was really great to have you with us. So for everyone else who's still here, we, as Norbert mentioned in the chat, we have a little virtual mingle happening. So feel free to leave this room and hop over into the mingle. And then after that, we've just got a closing keynote given by me where I mostly just spend time telling you what I'm going to give away to anybody who's left watching at this time of night. So thanks again, everyone, and appreciate it so much. Talk soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Nikki.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.